Today, I want to talk about greatness. How do those that we admire accomplish incredible things that few others can do? We all have our idols, whether they are your day-to-day role models or great societal figures. For today's talk, I want to break down how exceptional people are able to do the things that make them exceptional. And even more importantly, once we understand this driver, how do we harness it ourselves? Now, many of you in this audience are thinking, greatness, I just want to start waking up for my 9 a.m. classes, or I just want to finally get that professional opportunity that I've been eyeing. So my question to you is, why don't you? Why don't you just wake up and go to class? Why don't you just sacrifice the time you waste on social media, Netflix, or whatever your vice is, and make the sacrifices necessary for that professional opportunity? Why is it that every year we tell ourselves that we're going to get better grades, learn this or that skill, pursue that new venture, and it never really comes into fruition? Sure, the spark is alive for the first 2 weeks, and we stick to those perfect habits. But by week 4, we're back at square one, sleeping past our classes, not practicing that new language, and done working on that next big idea. Clearly, there is something that separates us from the people that we admire, some sort of invisible wall between you and I and the person that we've always wanted to be. Lucky for us, numerous experts from an array of fields have done years of research to crack this conundrum. In a study of the most effective leaders of large organizations, Jeffrey Pfeiffer, a professor at Stanford, found one trait that unites this exceptional group together. It wasn't a high IQ, it wasn't good people skills, it wasn't good effective public speaking, and it wasn't a fancy education. You see, it was energy. So what separates us from the people that we admire, it isn't some hidden gift, it's just energy. Now, if you're confused, I want you to close your eyes. Think back to some of your greatest and most productive moments. We've all felt this feeling before, that clarity of mind, that laser focus when you are able to propel yourself to your goal. Everything around you is silent, and there is just you and a clear path to what you need to do. What if instead of just feeling this feeling the night before an exam, or when our back is against the wall, we felt it every day and every moment? Then we could accomplish all that we set out to accomplish. Forget those 9 a.m. classes and forget that professional pursuits. We could change the world. We could change ourselves. So, what is this feeling, and why don't we feel it more consistently? You see, the results of Pfeiffer's study is actually rooted in the biology of our brains. Our brain is divided into 3 components. One part is our Homo sapien brain. This controls analytical and rational thinking. You want to get better grades? You have to wake up and go to class and work harder on those exams. You want that professional opportunity? You need to make sacrifices in your personal time to pursue it. Pretty simple and purely rational. We know what's good for us, don't we? Most of us can conceptualize what we have or should do to reach the things that we want to reach. So why don't we actually do them? Let me tell you about the other 2 parts of our brain. See, the other 2 parts of our brain controls our feelings, things like trust, anger, and something fundamental to this puzzle, decision making. You see, in a really cruel way, nature has made a gap between us deciding what's important and us actually doing the things necessary to achieve it. Now things make sense. This is why we press snooze on our alarm instead of waking up and going to class, even though we know it's good for us in the long run. This is why we spend our time on social media or waste our weekends in debauchery with our friends instead of pursuing that professional opportunity. It is these two parts of our brain that holds the key for us to accomplish all of our goals. It is in these two parts of our brain that holds the biggest obstacle that will prevent us from realizing any of them. So now let's take a step back from the science. Why am I here? Who is this kid? And did he just spend 10 minutes coming to the conclusion that in order to be successful, I just have to do right things and ignore the bad things? First off, tickets are non-refundable. And second of all, let me tell you about why I'm so passionate about this subject and how my life fundamentally changed a few years ago. I want to start by setting some context on my family background because it's important to my story. You see, my parents are Chinese immigrants, and my family is a living example of the American dream. My parents gave up everything to come here: their friends, their families, and their jobs. My parents made enormous sacrifices, and we struggled financially, but we had each other. My mom waited tables during the day so she could go to community college at night, and my dad worked for minimum wage at a research lab so he could improve his technical skills. But even in my family's deepest struggles, my parents always had a fire in their eyes, as if they knew that all of this would be worth it one day. It didn't make sense. It wasn't rational. No matter how you ran the calculus of pleasure versus pain, or benefits versus costs, or odds of success versus failure, the hardship that they put themselves through didn't make sense. Now, I understood this legacy from a young age. My parents made sure that I learned the values of hard work, sacrifice, and discipline. They pushed me to work harder than my peers, and I obeyed. I assumed my parents didn't live enjoyable lives, so why should I be absolved of sacrifice? All of this made sense until high school. Maybe it was puberty, but all of a sudden, the responsibilities, the expectations, and the duty, they weren't enough. I knew what I had to do and why it was good that I did those things, but I never felt that energy. I didn't make the right decisions. In fact, I made all of the wrong ones. I didn't work very hard. I looked for shortcuts, and I took unnecessary risks. Even worse, my perspective on life was an empty one. My sophomore year of high school, I was caught in one of the biggest academic dishonesty scandals in my school's history, and I have to report it on my college applications. Later that summer, I threw a party on someone else's property and was arrested. I entered someone's home without their permission and trashed everything. I was charged with residential burglary, a felony in the state of Illinois. I can still remember getting handcuffed, being dragged out in front of my family, and being told that I would spend the next 15 years of my life in prison. You never forget moments like that one. The world around you is silent, even the sobs of your mother. You see, you can feel anger or sadness, and there are always levers that you can pull to change your state. Regret is cruel because there are no levers. Everything already happened in the past. I remember leaving an attorney's office with my father, and there we sat silently in the car. I felt numb with regret. I've never seen my father cry before. He's a tough man, always shouldering the pain for his loved ones. But on that day, he broke down. He looked me in the eye and he said, "Son, if I could have my way, I would bear the consequences of your actions for the rest of my life. But I won't be able to do that anymore. you have to grow up. How did I end up here? How could I have been so stupid? How could I have been so foolish? I was raised the right way. I was given the right values. Rationally, I knew the path that I was headed on was the wrong one. So how did I end up here? It was the worst stretch of my life, but I got lucky. Destiny, fate, privilege, whatever you want to call it, tossed me a bone. And had this not occurred in a middle-class suburb, had I looked a little differently, maybe the outcome would have been different. But one thing was for sure, I needed to change. I needed to change my outlook on life. I needed to change my direction. I told myself that I would never feel this kind of regret ever again. The best part of this whole situation is it made me question. It made me question where I've been, where I am, and where I'm headed. It was precisely the sort of questioning that I never did before. It was always expectations, responsibilities, and duties that drove my decisions. And clearly, that sort of rational decision-making wasn't doing me any favors. I needed to disassemble the foundations of my life and put it together my way. I knew that it wouldn't be an easy process. But maybe, just maybe, it would finally be worth it. That energy that had eluded me for so long, it was time I reclaimed it. It was a long period of time and a very difficult one, full of self-doubt and full of searching. But what I found at the end of process was worth the sacrifice. You see, it was in the darkest moments of my life that I decided how I want to live the rest of it. And reinforced with the science that I referenced earlier, I want to share with you all what I found. The framework that I believe is the key for us to eradicate regrets and become the ultimate versions of ourselves. Step 1, find your purpose. Something that makes you excited to be alive, something greater than yourself. What you should figure out early in your life isn't what you should do this or next year. It's what you want to do in 20 or 30 years. What will give your life fulfillment in the long run? What is your life's purpose as you understand it now? It is not going to be an easy process. It will take a lot of questioning, a lot of time, and a lot of searching, but you owe it to yourself. You see, happiness and fulfillment, it isn't just some arithmetic equation in which you plug in pleasures and pain. You can feel immensely happy and fulfilled while going through unbearable pain. That is the beauty of sacrificing in the short term for our long-term goals. My parents had more comfortable and more pleasurable lives for themselves back in China, a job that matched their education, friends, and family, but they chose to struggle here for a decade for a reason. It's because purpose sustained them. And don't just take my word for it. Think of people that make great sacrifices. Think of martyrs, think of survivors, think of individuals that live life obsessed, focused, and undeterred. You see, purpose isn't always rational, but it is empowering and it will drive you to make effective decisions. Step 2, work backwards. Now that you've found your purpose, contextualize what you have to do and why you have to do it. Late night papers, early morning classes, difficult exams, they're always going to be painful. There will always be tough days at work. If you approach these things with an attitude that I have to do them because of some responsibility or obligation, you will surely falter because our brains are programmed for us to fail in such a scenario. Now, what if those classes and that professional opportunity became building blocks to an ultimate goal or stepping stones to a future in which you justify your existence? Now things can be special. If you can't create the connection between what you have to do and what you want to do, then you're pursuing the wrong things. You will never be exceptional if you're living life going through the motions while others are driven with purpose. Step 3, reflect regularly. Take every morning, every evening, every few weeks, every few months to seriously question, where have I been? Where am I now? Where am I headed? And how do I feel about all of this? So you see, we face so many pressures from other people, from society, and everyone and everything wants a piece of us. But you and I, we are the most important components of our world, and it's time that we gave ourselves the time that we deserve. This is how you keep yourself in check and on the right path throughout the chaos of life. So find your purpose, work backwards, and reflect regularly. I believe that this framework, if exercised actively, is the bridge between your rational and analytical mind with the mind that actually makes decisions. It is going to connect what you have and should do to you actually doing them. Now, I'm not claiming to be some guru or to have achieved greatness myself. In fact, far from it. I still have a lot more to learn, a lot more times to fail, and hopefully a lot more to achieve. But what I found fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life, and maybe it will change yours. So ponder your past and think about your future and be excited. Be excited that in this moment in time, we live in the greatest civilization in human history at a time where everything we know is constantly being challenged and being changed. There is no better moment than now for you to uncover your purpose and unleash your true potential. And maybe, just maybe, you'll achieve greatness that can inspire others. Thank you.